Hi folks, in this video I thought I'd take the opportunity to do another sort of micro-examination style video, and specifically I'm going to be looking at Silverstein Ligatures. In my hand I have the rather expensive new Hexa ligature by Silverstein, and on my sax already set up I have the Cryo 4 ligature, which we've been selling for a little while, but new into the fold is this Hexa. And the Hexa, in its differentiation from the Cryo 4, because probably to your sort of eye view at the moment they look very similar, has one extra chord, dotted chord as Silverstein describe it, so it has 6 chords here rather than 5 chords, and it has these little beautiful crystals at the end of each fine tuner, but otherwise it is largely the same. However, there is an extra $100 difference in price tag, so I thought it would be interesting to put these two sort of premium level ligatures through their paces just to see if we can hear any differences, albeit subtle differences. Yeah, so I thought it would be an interesting spotlight one. I mean, just to mention something a little further about Silverstein before I get going with this, you might be wondering, why should I be spending so much money on a ligature given that you can get yourself you know, a basic Rovner for 25–30 pounds or so, or you can go even lower than that, just get yourself a basic metal ligature. Well, some years ago I did actually record a video on a wide selection of ligatures that I might point you to go and view first, perhaps, before looking at this video in its completion. And what I discovered in that video, where I compared about, I don't know, 7 or 8 ligatures, was that they did all make a difference, and actually the viewers pointed out that they could hear these differences. Mainly for me as the player producing the sound at the time, it was more something of a feeling in the way I produced the sound. So in some ligatures I felt more of a resistance, which enabled me to play in a different way. In others, the sound just sort of trickled out and it allowed me to sort of articulate better. So it pushed me in that direction, or gave me a confidence in that area, which is something that the listener doesn't necessarily feel or hear. But when I start playing in that way, then of course the listener is going to detect that. So in a sense, there is that connection between the player and his feeling and then what the audience listens to. So that was the important lesson for me with that particular examination. But there were some subtle audio differences as well. You know, if you put your headphones on and just go purely for sound, you could hear those distinctions. I think it's going to be even harder to hear a distinction between these two ligatures that are so similar really in spec. And some of the things I have to take care of when I am doing this kind of test is just to keep the playing as smooth and tonal as possible. You know, forget your Charlie Parker licks, that really doesn't help this exercise at all. So yeah, without further ado, let's get going. I've already got it set up for the Cryo 4, so I'm going to start with something on this, and then I'm going to try playing the same thing on this more expensive Hexa ligature. Okay, so again we're dealing with real levels of subtlety there, and in fact there was a little bit of a gap between when I set up one to the other that I would really just need to go back and forward several times to feel those differences. Another thing that you didn't see because it was off camera, when I set this mouthpiece up, It's very important that you guys do this if you're ever doing this kind of comparison. I held the reed against the mouthpiece in precisely the same place, so this kind of grip here and here, undid the ligature, slipped the new one on, because if there's any difference in reed position, to be honest, that's going to trump the differences between these ligatures, which is very subtle, and so it makes the experiment null and void. So I tried to maintain that, and I tried to keep the same intensity of kind of air pressure and velocity there, and obviously the same phrase. So that's the disclaimer. All that aside, differences. Possibly feeling a little bit more resonance with this one. So this is the Hexa. Obviously I finished with the Hexa, the most expensive one. Seems the most logical way to go about this. How much of that is psychological? You know, a blind test would be a useful thing to do with this kind of thing, so that I'm not being influenced with the way I play. So again, I'm interested to know what you guys think listening to it. If the differences are there, they're very subtle. We're dealing with one extra chord, some little crystals, you know, whether that's making a difference with the vibrations, it's so minor. And, you know, I'll just go back to some general points about differences in tone. The difference, for example, between something like a, I don't know, Theo 1A Shiva compared to just a regular bog standard sort of slant style ligature of a different brand, mouthpiece of a different brand, is extreme and night and day. And you know, we can play all sorts of stuff when we're doing those comparisons, and you just hear the differences. With these little things here, we're talking subtle within subtle, as is pretty obvious. So sometimes when it comes down to selecting a ligature like this, it can just be for reasons of feeling like you have the ultimate setup. I mean, there's no denying that Silverstein produce really advanced technology ligatures. If you were to compare either of these two against just a standard, slightly shoddily made gold ligature, which is perhaps a little bit warped and misshapen, you will hear those differences, and you'll certainly feel them. The performance level will be inconsistent as you go through the different ranges. And I remember distinctly when I did this ligature test before, when trying these Silversteins, that I thought the sound was just sort of elevated to another level in terms of what it added to the current setup of mouthpiece and reed that I already had. So it really was kind of like the icing on the cake. So there's no denying they are great ligatures. As for the difference between whether you go for a Hexa versus a Cryo 4, is it worth it? It's very subtle, and I would say the jury is out to some degree. But still worthy of an experiment. I hope you guys can hear some differences, and I hope you found this useful.